So do we have further questions for Lee?
Yeah, would you?
Well, I'd just like to say this is the first time any of us have seen it, and we didn't know what the hell to expect. When a lawyer's asking you questions, you never know. But Lee, I'd just like to congratulate you. I think you did a very good job in balancing with the pros and the cons, and I think you really captured it, and we all appreciate it.
I needed a little time to really think about this, but I think it's a very impressive film. I'm astounded at the story that Lee has told and what made this film was the fact you got Willie in it. I first met Willie as a young kid from the Northwest who had had almost no experience with people of color. He and I spent about 10 days in the car. The first 3 days we didn't even know how to talk to each other because we didn't understand each other. I have thought the world of Willie's story from that point on, and I was under the impression that you had a hard time getting him to be in the film.
He refused at the last minute. I did not interview him, in fact. Barry Perlman took the charge. He wouldn't let me. So.
Well, you obviously got it done, whoever did it, and I think that has added tremendously to the film. Willie is someone I have tremendous respect for, and that capped it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, could you explain a bit about the two men who are very critical and who end the film after the credits, who they are, and
Stu Lancaster and Don Saul were early board members when Uplift People was formulated, and they live in Tucson, and I'm sure they would have loved to have been here. I lovingly call them my Muppets because they remind me of the two assistants. Yes, you know, who always comments on things in a very critical way. But the beautiful thing is that they meet every Friday morning at Borders bookstore and drink coffee and still discuss the issues of the world. So that's what Stu and Don are doing today.
What I found as an audience is that I do remember the songs and some of the programs that the Uplift People performed in, but it was interesting that you really are exposing corruption. You're exposing the corruption of the American government. And I question, is it a political movie? Is it a movie that is trying to expose us to political corruption of our government? Is it an anti-American film? Or is it a film that is presentational? Is it just presenting the facts? I'm not sure.
I'm a lawyer, and let me answer that like one.
Yes.
All right? When I go and present a case, I could give you both sides. But I'm going to leave you as the jury and you as the judge, and you can make that decision on your own.
It was, I think it's remarkable for a variety of reasons, including I grew up with, my mother was in a religious cult. It was based in Maine at one point, which is where I grew up. It's called The Bible Speaks, and it was very similar in its operations and its mentalities from what I can tell. And maybe that's characteristics, those are characteristics shared by, you know, cult or cult-like organizations generally. But personally, having seen this film, I found it very moving because, you know, there are personal aspects I could identify with.
You know, for me as a filmmaker, it really went beyond this limited, narrow, in my view, cult. For me, it's about exploring and looking back and reflecting on choices we make as youth. We all have that youthful idealism. We all want to change the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great and positive thing. Look where we are right now in history. We are looking forward. And I wanted to create a film where people were looking back at their own lives and the choices that they're making, and in a groupthink concept. And I don't care what groupthink it is. It doesn't have to be religious. It could be political. It could be social. It could be any kind of ideology that we ascribe to such a point. In this case, it's like getting on the Small World ride at Disneyland and never getting off. Okay? But that's just this experience. And in the past 40 years, we have a lot to reflect on. And for me, I didn't want to leave Upward people without a future, because we have one, and we have one nationally and internationally. And that's really what I hope you all got out of this film as well. You know, that we can look forward and not just back, but in looking back, we give the grace to each other for the reasons and the choices that we make, and we can reflect on them going forward.
When you guys were in the group and someone was asked to leave or forced to leave, did that send a ripple of doubt throughout the group at all?
Whenever someone was sent home, usually for drugs, it tended to make the group stronger. In any kind of cult environment, whenever there's kind of an outsider that gets ejected, the group tends to draw together more strongly, because there's that person and then there's all of you, and you've kind of defined the outsider and you.
And John, I think you want to respond to that.
I just want to add one thing. This was a unique experience, both in moral Re-Armament and Up With People, for thousands of people. In most cases, I think it was probably a positive experience. And there are hundreds of people that I still know of who are involved in some kind of activity in their life beyond themselves, in which they're trying to do something for the future of the world, for the future of their kids and grandkids, whatever. And, you know, what Lee did in the film was tell a lot of the good and the bad too, as there is in most things in life. There's good and bad. And there was a lot of good came out of that.
Lee brought out some things in that interview with me that I hadn't really gotten down to yet. And I think that's what, frankly, where Glenn is. She's got a lot of stuff to deal with. I've dealt with a lot of stuff. But it made me think about some things that are really important to me, as I said in the interview, about forgiveness. And after that interview, and being really emotional all of a sudden, again, I wrote a letter to Blanton. And I want you to know that I let him know that I'd forgiven him. And I got a letter back. And he said, for anything that I've done to hurt you or to, I can't remember exactly, but it was that tone. I want you to know I'm truly sorry. I believe him. But whether I believe him or not, that it really didn't matter. What really mattered is what I did. And that's what I wanted you to know. I also want you to know that we talk about cultish aspects, but that's all it is. It's cultish aspects, because the positive effect of Up With People, I believe, is still with us. It's going to be demonstrated on Tuesday. When you think about the thousands and thousands of people, like that gentleman sitting in the chair with that shotgun, and that's the first time I've heard that story. When you think of the thousands of connections like that that were made willing, and I thought about Hazel with the group in Tanzania, or in Kenya, when we were singing to that Maasai tribe. Hazel and I are still really good friends in Nashville, Tennessee. Those things still live. And whether there are cultish aspects to Up With People, it's just a tiny part of this phenomenon. I am so grateful that this legacy is going to be seen by my 3 adult children and their wives.